We're in this series that we're calling Big Questions, and we're using this time leading us up to Easter to kind of think through some of the questions that Jesus asked. If you know Jesus very well at all, you know that he was a master of life and had this uncanny ability to ask questions of people from time to time that would penetrate beyond sort of the surface level and penetrate deep into the soul. In fact, they would be the questions that ultimately every single human being must wrestle with as we grow and mature into the people that God created us to be. And we started a couple of weeks ago with Jesus asking the question to his disciples, who do people say that I am? Then, do you want to be healed? Last week, Anna helped us wrestle with the question, why are you so afraid? And today I want to invite you to think through a question that Jesus asked another disciple, the disciple Peter, which is simple: do you love me? Do you love me? If you have your Bible with you, we're going to end up in John chapter 21. We're going to be all over the place, but that's kind of where we're going to end up. And so if you're old school and brought a Bible, want to pull it up on your mobile device, you can do that. If you're a note taker, right there in our app, we've got a place for you to kind of follow along. Helps you kind of keep focused, right, on a good rainy day when you're wondering, is Tennessee really going to do it this time? I am a man of faith, and I say, yes, they are. Yes, they are. Now, so I want to start, though, today by talking about it. It is a big deal. In fact, it is such a big deal that some of us can't seem to get past it. It just seems to pop into our minds at the most random times. Maybe we have people in our lives, and when we run into them, they immediately remind us of it. They don't even have to say anything. What is it? It is that thing. It's that season. It's that series of events. It's that circumstance or that decision. It's that one time that if you could somehow go back in time, there's no doubt you would have done it completely different. And here's the thing. Some of us believe it defines us. You think that all people see when they look at you is it. It's there when you wake up in the morning and it's there when you go to bed at night. It's right there by your side. All day long, every day. It is as close to your heart as anything else. And it's like maybe you can't seem to move forward because you're so consumed, so literally full of it, that it feels like it stopped you in your tracks. And the truth of the matter is that it can represent a lot of different things. For some of us, it is a broken marriage. And we've tried to keep it hidden. We can put up a facade. People think our relationship's great, but we know on the inside it's a disaster. Maybe it is an addiction that we can't seem to get free from. Maybe it's a relational breakdown that started relatively innocently, right? But it somehow managed to spiral out of control and we don't even know how. Maybe it is something that you're dealing with at your job. Maybe it is a missed opportunity. You know it was the one you should have stepped into and you can't go back and seize that moment. Maybe it was a corner that you cut that led to trouble. Maybe it is something you're going to deal with when you go back to school tomorrow. It could even be something more subtle. Maybe something that nobody really even knows about. Maybe it was a decision that we made. We make a lot of decisions every single day. Maybe it was a series of decisions that ultimately led us down a path that we never thought we would go down. Maybe it's as simple as something that you said. And you knew the second the words were forming on your lips, before they even left your mouth, you knew that's not something I should say, but you did it anyway. We're all capable of absolutely wrecking people when we're angry. Maybe it was a circumstance or a situation. For Peter, it actually started the day that he met Jesus. Peter and his friends were fishermen. And while that was a noble job, it was not considered to be anything of any real significance. There was no status involved. They were dirty. They were often uneducated. They were doing important, yet what most people thought were very menial tasks. And then one day a young rabbi shows up in town, and that would not have been unusual. Rabbis did this kind of thing all the time. And part of their visit would involve not only teaching, but they would kind of scan the community, and they would start handpicking people from that community that they thought had the ability to carry on the rabbi's teaching. And so they would always look for people who were really smart, or people who had a strong work ethic, or people that they felt like had the ability to not just make a commitment in the heat of the moment, but actually be able to carry out and see through that commitment to the very end. And the reality is Peter never had any hope that any rabbi was going to come along and by any stretch of the means choose somebody like him. But then comes Jesus. And Jesus starts to teach, and he starts to let people know why he showed up. And there was something about Jesus that was different than every other rabbi. It's the way that he talked about what they were going to experience. It's out there, it's God's kingdom, but it could become a reality here in this life. And nobody was saying anything like that. And then he starts to handpick his disciples. And unlike every rabbi that had ever come before him, Jesus starts to make his choice. And who are the very first disciples that this young rabbi picks? It's Peter and his brother Andrew, of all people. And Peter's life was never the same. He dropped his nets and left everything behind. I don't know what it was like for you when you met Jesus, but I can still remember everything about that moment, where it stopped being a series of teachings, or it stopped being this person that some preacher talked about, and it became a reality in my life. And I realized for the very first time that if my life is going to go the path that I want it to go, I got to deal with Jesus. And I was a teenager when I gave my life to Jesus. And I remember being almost speechless. I was completely overwhelmed with emotion, and I'm not a highly emotional guy. If I'm honest, I was scared half to death. I felt freedom, yet I was overwhelmed with anxiety because even as a teenager, I liked controlling the direction of my life, and I knew right away that if I actually gave my life to Jesus, it may not go the way that I think it ought to go, and that caused a lot of fear and anxiety inside of me. That's me. I can't imagine what it was like for Peter. His whole experience of Jesus comes through this declaration, this promise that he makes. Matthew, one of Jesus' disciples, was there, saw it happen. Here's how he tells the story, Matthew chapter 16. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" "Well," they replied, "some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others say Jeremiah or one of the other prophets." Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "You are blessed, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. You did not learn that from any human being. Now I say to you that you are Peter, which means rock. And upon this rock I will build my church, and all the powers of hell will not conquer it. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you forbid on earth will be forbidden in heaven. And whatever you permit on earth will be permitted in heaven." I mean, y'all, that right there, that's an incredible experience for someone to have. What a massive life change that Peter's undergoing, right? Like unknown fisherman, nobody cares about, making no ripples in the world, all the way to being the one on whom shoulders Jesus is going to launch a revolution that would literally change all of human history, and by the way, provide salvation to every human being that desires it. That's unbelievable. And then if you read the stories of Jesus' life, the Gospels, there were the miracles, there were the teachings that Peter got to listen to, there were all the travels, the places they went, and all the things that they got to see. all the things that we read happening to Jesus and his disciples. They get 3 years in, right? And it's like this crescendo moment. They're going back to Jerusalem. And like people are there waiting and the gates of the city fling open and there's like this huge celebration. It's Mardi Gras on steroids. It's like the Super Bowl and every other monster event rolled into one, and people are shouting and cheering for joy. And Peter's thinking, well, they get it too. This guy is the Messiah, the one that we've all been hearing about since we were little kids sitting on our grandparents' lap. Salvation has finally come to the people of Israel. What a moment that had to be. There's all this celebration, but then a few days later, there's this upper room and there's a solemn meal. It's a meal they'd shared many times before, but then after that meal, there's another meal, and there's like bread and wine, and there's all this talk of betrayal and crucifixion. Here's what happens, John 13, verse 31. As soon as Judas left the room, another disciple, somebody else that Jesus thought had the ability to carry on the message. As soon as Judas left the room, Jesus says, the time has come for the Son of Man to enter into his glory, and God will be glorified because of him. And since God receives glory because of the Son, he will give his own glory to the Son, and he will do so at once. Dear children, I will be with you only a little longer. And as I told the Jewish leaders, you'll search for me, but you can't come where I'm going. In other words, boys, I've been saying it for 3 years, but I'm about to leave. Verse 34. So now I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. I wonder if sometimes we don't lose sight of that. It's very direct. Love one another. Your love for each other is what's going to tell the world that I'm the real deal. This is not an insider-outsider thing where Jesus is saying love everybody else, although he does say that. He's saying love each other inside. Our ability to love one another is what says to everyone on the outside, there's something different about this bunch. It's fascinating. Simon Peter asked, Lord, where are you going? And Jesus replied, you can't go with me now, but you will follow me later. Why can't I come now, Lord? Honest question. I'm ready to die for you. Jesus answered, die for me? I tell you the truth, Peter, before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you'll deny me 3 times that you even knew me. That, my friends, is Peter's it moment. He was going to do the one thing that he never thought in a million years he would ever end up doing. What about you? What's the it in your life? Whatever it is, it's that thing that is always with you, that never seems to really leave your mind. That's maybe been with you so long, it's just a part of who you are. And in fact, if you're honest with yourself, the absence of it in your life actually causes more anxiety than having to wrestle with it every single day. Well, if you can relate to anything that I'm saying, I've got good news for you. Because if you're in a relationship with Jesus, it does not get the final word in your life. Surely you and I can agree that failure is a normal part of life, right? The question is not, how do you avoid failure? It's actually, how do you handle failure when it happens? Which is why we're digging into this story. This question, do you love me, is not actually about love. It's about, can you pick yourself up and move through your failure? And so this morning I want to offer a few ideas that might help free us from fear when failure comes our way, because make no mistake about it, we're all going to fall flat on our face at some point. And the first one is extremely basic, but profoundly important. Focus on progress over perfection. Focus on progress over perfection. Stephen, it's a church. We're supposed to be talking about perfection, right? Well, that's part of the church's problem. We've convinced ourselves that we're all pretty, perfect, nice smelling, hair coiffed, beautiful skinned people. And we don't realize or aren't willing to admit to one another that we're not perfect. None of us are perfect, so focus on progress over perfection. In fact, if you read the Bible very much, which if you don't, I would challenge you to build it into your daily life. You can do that a million different ways. There's a lot of free apps you can get. You can join our daily reading program. We'll send it straight to you. We even record someone reading it for you so that as you drive down the road, you can just listen to Scripture. Build it into your daily life. But if you read it on a daily basis or semi-daily basis, you'll notice that apart from Jesus, not one time does God ever use a perfect person. All you got to do is read. Look at anyone ever mentioned in the Bible, and it will become glaringly obvious. Abraham, father of faith, started out as a pagan. Moses, great leader, bringing the people of Israel out of Egypt, had actually murdered someone. Noah rebuilt the human race, could not hold his liquor, and that got him in a ton of trouble. Rahab, who protected the people of Israel in the promised land, sold her body for a living. Samson had the ego the size of Texas. Gideon didn't have the courage to punch his way out of a paper bag. David, one of the greatest leaders in human history, had a very deep issue with infidelity. Paul killed people. And then think about the people Jesus hung out with. They weren't successful by any stretch of the word. Most of them were fishermen, and that would not have commanded anyone's respect. Matthew, even worse, according to the how people lived that day, was a tax collector. Nobody likes tax collectors. James and John, two of Jesus' closest disciples, struggled with their ego so much so that they get their mom to go to Jesus to try to get them more prestige among the disciples. We talk about helicopter parents. Are you kidding me? Mommy, can you go to Jesus and get me more power? That is ridiculous. Thomas, who lived every day for 3 years with Jesus, was filled with doubt. And then there's Peter. Peter could not control his own temper and lived most of his life with his foot in his mouth. He was prone to making promises he could not keep. And he did the exact thing, here it is, that Jesus knew he would do. 3 times he denied Jesus when it mattered most. Y'all, make no mistake about it, people in the Bible were by and large train wrecks at best. And yet every single time God used them to do greater things than they could have ever dreamed of or imagined for their lives. Jesus knew exactly what Peter was going to do. He wasn't shocked. Luke, another one of the disciples, was there. This is what he wrote about that denial. Luke chapter 22, verse 60. And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered the saying of the Lord, how he had said to him, before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. Put yourself in that moment. You've made this great declaration. Jesus, why can't I go with you? I'm willing to die for you. Jesus looks you in the eye. Die? You're going to deny me 3 times. And then in that moment, when you realize everything that Jesus said about your life is coming true, and you look up and he's staring at you from across the courtyard, can you imagine what that must have been like? I mean, if anything else, y'all, we have to agree that right there, that's actual failure. But we're going to see in a second that Peter's failure did not disqualify him from being used by God. And that is good news, because that means that no matter who you are, no matter where you've been or how far you may think you have fallen or how bad you have failed in your life, there is still unbelievable possibility for your life. If you are drawing air into your lungs, then God is not done yet. There is a plan and a purpose, and it does not matter how bad you have fallen or how far you have fallen or what you've done in your life, God can still use you. There's an important part of our faith that I think for whatever reason, sometimes we have a tendency to miss it. If you read the Bible, there's this theme that runs literally from cover to cover that points to God's biggest interest inside of your life and my life and inside the life of every human being, and it gets mentioned all the time. If you start out, say, in the book of Ezekiel, God says, and I will give you a new heart, and I will put a new spirit in you. I will take your stony, stubborn heart and give you a tender, responsive heart. Jeremiah 17:10. But I, the Lord, search all hearts and examine secret motives. I give all people their due rewards according to what their actions deserve. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5, trust in the Lord with all of your heart and do not depend on your own understanding. Seek his will in all you do, and he will show you the right path to take. Proverbs chapter 4, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Proverbs 21, people may be right in their own eyes, but the Lord examines the heart. 1 Samuel chapter 16, but the Lord said to Samuel, don't judge by his appearance or height, for I have rejected him. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And just in case somebody is a scholar and thinks, well, Stephen, that's an Old Testament thing. We're freed up from the Old Testament. Well, listen to what Jesus said. Matthew 5, verse 8, God blesses those whose hearts are pure, for they will see God. What's the Bible trying to tell us? It's simple, that God's primary interest is not changing your behavior. God's primary interest is changing your heart. Well, Stephen, I can't believe you said that. Well, I did say it. I actually didn't say it. God did. What happens is, as God gets access to your heart and my heart, and that heart begins to change over time, my behavior starts to change. That's why you don't have to be perfect. You can mess up royally and God can still use you. You can fall flat on your face and God can still move in your life. You and I can fail, and yet God can still move and work and make us strong again. So what are we supposed to do? Just keep moving. That's it. Just keep pushing. Keep allowing God to stretch you and grow you. You can't be perfect. So focus on progress, not perfection. One thing that I can say, I promise you, is I ain't anywhere close to the man that I need to be. But when I look back over the course of my life, I sure ain't the person I used to be. And there are those kind of testimonies all across this room. None of us are perfect, but we can all make progress. Why we're a Next Step Church. You're gonna drive yourself crazy trying to be perfect. You're never gonna be the perfect spouse. You're never gonna be the perfect mom or dad. You're never gonna be the perfect employee. You're never gonna be the perfect friend. You're never gonna be the perfect Christian. Because our faith, unlike the pressures of our culture, it's built on grace. And grace has to be received. You can't beg for it. You can't borrow it. You can't steal it from your mama. You got to receive it yourself. That's what makes it so powerful. So focus on making progress in your life. Can I be better today than I was yesterday? This time next year, am I further along in my relationship with Jesus than I am today? Here's the second thought I have for you, is we got to get a right understanding of what true success is. You guys know as well as I do that there is a monster difference between our culture's standards of success and the standard that gets set by our faith. In our little corner of the world, here in West Knoxville, success is often determined by what you do for a living, or by the neighborhood you live in, or the type of school that your son or daughter attends. It's determined by what we drive and where we spend our Saturdays and how much stuff we've got in our garage or what we happen to have tied up at our dock near the lake. And what I think sometimes we fail to realize is that God doesn't really care about that kind of stuff. God's not so much interested in what you and I do, but is primarily interested in who you and I are. I think about Joshua in the Old Testament. Joshua lived around the time of Moses, and Moses was the guy that God chose to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt. And one day Moses dies and Joshua shows up on the scene, and here's how the story goes. After the death of Moses, the Lord's servant, the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant. He said, Moses, my servant, is dead. Therefore, the time has come for you to lead these people, the Israelites, across the Jordan River into the land that I've given them. I promise you what I promised Moses. Wherever you set your foot, you'll be on land that I've given you. From the Negev wilderness in the south to the Lebanon mountains in the north, from the Euphrates River in the east to the Mediterranean Sea in the west, including all the land of the Hittites. No one will be able to stand against you as long as you live, for I will be with you as I was with Moses. I will not fail you or abandon you. Be strong and courageous, for you are the one who will lead these people to possess all the land I swore to their ancestors that I would give them. Be strong and very courageous. Here it is. Be careful to obey all the instructions Moses gave you. Do not deviate from them, turning either to the right or to the left. Then you will be successful in everything you do. Study this book of instruction continually. Meditate on it day and night so you'll be sure to obey everything written in it. Only then will you prosper and succeed in all that you do. This is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. It's a great story. What's the point? It's simple. From God's perspective, actual success in life is doing what God tells us to do. See, if you want to get life right, then all you got to do is do what God says do. That's why the Bible is so important. You're not going to stumble your way into the God life. None of us is going to have faith transferred into us by some weird osmosis thing. It's not going to rub off of our grandmother or our parents and somehow stick to us. We've each got to pursue it on our own. That was the first question that we looked at in this series. Jesus asked his best friends the penultimate question. What do people say about me? But here it is. Who do you say that I am? And until you answer that question of who Jesus is in your life, life is never going to work out the way that you want it to. Here's another thought. Failure always precedes victory. Failure always precedes victory. Peter's worst day wound up being followed by his best day. His worst day we read about a few minutes ago. Jesus is telling them he's getting ready to go, and Peter's like, yo, why can't I go with you? I'd be willing to die for you. Jesus answers, die for me. I tell you the truth, Peter, before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny me 3 times. You'll deny 3 times that you even know me. Which is a good reminder as we dig further into this. When it comes to your life and my life, we cannot be our own evaluator. There's a guy named Henry Cloud. He's a psychologist and a prolific author, and he writes about this thing called the death spiral of failure. And it always starts out, okay, I've messed up, and when I mess up and fail, I take that personally. And when I take that personally, over time, I convince myself that I'm not going to be able to win at anything. And so what I took personally then becomes pervasive in my life. And if it goes unchecked long enough, it's eventually going to become permanent, where I start to believe that failure is just who I am. I'm never going to get anything right in life. It's the death spiral of failure. Here's the problem with being your own evaluator. Look at the 2 people that denied Jesus. We don't like talking about Judas. Judas had the same experience Peter did. He got the call when nobody else was calling him. He got the decision to leave everything behind and follow him. He was there. He listened to him teach. He made every trip. He saw every miracle. He watched every person being set free. He had an opportunity to stand up, and he didn't. He made a mistake. It became personal. It became pervasive. He had convinced himself there's no way that God's going to get me out of this one. Same experience Peter had. But then the story ends with Jesus bringing restoration. This is from John 21. After breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? They're sitting there as the disciples. Do you love me more than everybody else does? Yes, Lord, Peter replied, you know that I love you. Then feed my lambs. Jesus repeated the question, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, Peter said, you know that I love you. Then take care of my sheep. A third time, Jesus asked him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt that Jesus asked the question a third time. He said, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said, then feed my sheep. Please don't miss what's happening here. There are no accidents. It was intentional that while they were out fishing that day, that Jesus showed up after the resurrection and started making breakfast. He kindled the same kind of fire that would have been burning the night that Peter had denied Jesus, not once, but 3 times. So when the smoke wafted out over the water, because they were just a few hundred yards away, and that filled Peter's nostrils, he would have been immediately reminded of where he had been already. The fact that he's feeding them, it's just like that night when he took bread and wine, gave thanks to God, gave it to his disciples. He's giving them food. This conversation, asking the question, do you love me? Not once, but 3 times, giving him the same directive. Then feed my lambs, take care of my sheep, feed my sheep. What he's saying is, Peter, pick yourself up. I told you you were gonna do this. Your whole existence is not based on your performance, it's based on my performance. I went to the cross for your denial. I've set you free. Your life doesn't end with a denial. No, man, pick yourself up. There's work to do. God has called you by name. There's a plan and a purpose. You got a mission to launch. 3 times, 1 for each denial. Jesus is saying to Peter, it's gonna be okay. Because your future's not based on you, it's based on me. It's grace. What if the overarching point of this story is that God's grace is greater than our sin? Like, if you didn't take anything else away, but you walked out of here actually believing, right? Not hearing, but actually believing, okay, this week I'm hopefully gonna have some successes, but there's a good shot I'm gonna fail because I gotta deal with this very difficult thing called people. And people aren't always a blast. I'm gonna say something I don't wanna say. I'm gonna accidentally post something out of kind of a knee-jerk response. I'm gonna miss an opportunity. I'm gonna hurt somebody. Whatever it is, in that moment, what if the first thought we had was, okay, God's bigger than this. I'm gonna offer it back to him. I'm gonna receive his grace, and I'm gonna go make that situation right. Can you imagine how different your life might be this week? If you didn't let failure stop you in your tracks, if you just kind of embraced it and said, you know what, I'm a human being. And this side of heaven, I ain't perfect, but I've given my life to one who is. And I'm gonna trust that his grace, as he says, is sufficient for me. That it's gonna get me through the rest of this day, and it's gonna be waiting on me tomorrow morning when I wake up, and I'm gonna be able to carry that grace with me into tomorrow, and into 3 days from now, and into 10 years from now, and if I'm still alive in 20 years from now, and every single day, I'm just gonna give God thanks because I get to be a part of what he's doing. So I wanna end where we started, which is, what is your it? And how long are you willing to let it hold you back? And what if, maybe from your perspective, for the 1,000th time, you bring that it back to God? What might it look like if you actually started to get free from it today? How different might your marriage be? How different might your relationship with your son or daughter be if you could deal once and for all with it? What kind of confidence would you have going into tomorrow if you could get just a little bit of room between you and it? I'm telling you, it is possible. Because just as surely as Jesus brought restoration to Peter, Jesus can bring restoration to you. I'm just one beggar trying to tell another beggar where to find bread. I can't bring you the relief you're looking for, but I know Jesus can. A lot of different ways you can do that. You can come down front and spend a few minutes in prayer. You can make an altar out of where you're sitting right now. Maybe you want to get crazy, right? Just maybe like open up your hands and close your eyes and just kind of sit and absorb God's Holy Spirit. Maybe you just want to have a conversation internally. God, you know I'm wrestling with this. I can't hide anything from you. And I need your power to invade my life and help me deal with this, or it's going to hold me back another day. The point is, this is a great time to do a little bit of business. It might just be that somebody in this room's got a divine appointment to begin to step into freedom. And you can do that today, but you got to come. And so you come down in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.